Hi, this is Rob Nelson with tappingthematrix.com. I'd like to share one of my recent sessions with you, and I think this session illustrates how we can do with matrix reimprinting some generational healing, which can make all the difference for somebody. So in this case, my client came in with an issue of compulsive spending. Fortunately, not a really big problem. She wasn't buying Porsches or anything. But after doing a little bit of tapping on that, it became apparent that what was underneath, what was driving the compulsive spending, was actually competitiveness, having to keep up with colleagues in this case. So, okay, well, where did that competitiveness come from? It didn't take much digging. My client grew up in a family of with 3 older brothers, and Dad was brilliant, he was very successful, and he set up an atmosphere of hyper-competitiveness in the house. He would rate the 3 boys and their sister on everything, from their height, and measuring their height, their school performance, how much they were eating, how much they weighed, just everything got compared and contrasted. And there was such a feeling in the family of needing to win. So we came up with a memory when my client was 8 years old, and she had to go in and show her dad a report card. And this was a bit of a ritual. Every time there was a report card, all 4 kids would have to show it to Dad. If they got straight A's, then they were rewarded with a mechanical pencil. That was the big reward. If they got anything less than an A, though, there was a very uncomfortable grilling, sort of an ordeal of, well, how did this happen? What are you doing wrong? What do you need to change? She would look forward to these sessions with great dread. And I actually asked my client, what would happen if you got a C or even a D? And she just threw back her head and laughed. She said, that was inconceivable. What we're talking about here is getting a B instead of an A, or even possibly an A minus would set up this terrible grilling. So with matrix reimprinting, we have our client step into the picture as they are now and tap on the younger self. Find out what they're feeling. In this case, it was an 8-year-old younger self, and she was feeling tremendous dread and anxiety. She'd gotten a B. So we're tapping on her and introducing the concepts that, no matter what your grades, you're still a valuable person. And this was a tremendously alien concept to her. It took quite a bit of tapping and reframing for her to even get this idea. If you weren't perfect in this family, if you weren't close to perfect, basically you were garbage, and the consequence would be being thrown out, being discarded. That was the great fear, the great or else behind the competition. You have to win or else you're basically going to be thrown out. So tapping with this little girl, went okay, and then we asked, how would you like things to change? Well, of course, she wanted her dad not to be such a hard ass. Well, we're going to have to do some tapping on Dad. This is something we do in matrix reimprinting. So I had my adult client in the picture begin tapping on her dad, take his hand. Why is it's so important for you to prove your own worth through your children, which is basically what was happening. So through a little bit of tapping and then just asking Dad, when did this pattern start for you? We got taken right back to a memory where Dad was about 10 years old, and he was out with his older brother, and they were hunting and just running through the woods with their rifles, shooting, and they had the family dog, which was really Dad's hunting hound, with them, just having a ball, running through the forest. When, of course, something terrible happened. My client's father, the 10-year-old, raised his rifle, took a shot into some brush, and unbeknownst to him, the dog was there, and he shot and killed the dog. He and his brother came upon the dog, and the brother said to him, "Oh boy, are you going to get it from Dad?" And instantly, any feelings that boy had of sadness, grief, regret, shame over having killed the dog were completely eclipsed by fear. Terror, really, because Dad was prone to beating them and whipping them, and here his brother saying, "Oh boy, are you going to get it from Dad?" So we stepped in at that point, and I had my adult client step in there and begin tapping on her father's 10-year-old younger self. And the first thing, of course, we tapped away was all that fear, and fear of being whipped. And what was really interesting was underneath all that was very intense grief, very intense sorrow and shame. It wasn't just Dad's hunting dog. It was the family dog, and the boy just felt terrible over what he'd done. And interestingly, because of the fear overlaying that, he had never been able to process it. There had never been any time or space for him to deal with those feelings. So we helped him do that through the tapping. Of course, he wasn't happy about having killed the dog, but he was able to let go a lot of the shame, as it was an accident. So the next step was him needing to tell his father. He was absolutely dreading it. We did some more tapping on that. And what's interesting here is, in real life, when this boy did tell his father, he did not receive a beating from him. He received something far worse. The father told him that that dog was worth more to me than you are, and then he never spoke to his son again the rest of his life. And just absolute abandonment, absolutely devastating for that boy. So this time, because we were there, because we were doing tapping and within the matrix reimprinting, we were able to get a much better outcome. I believe that we did some tapping on my client's grandfather, her father's father. And so what we ended up with there for this 10-year-old was he told his father, and then he went out to bury the dog. And his brother showed up. The dog, he had just finished burying him. The grave was fresh. His brother showed up. His father shows up. And his father's hand comes down on his shoulder, and his father says, "Son, I know you're feeling just miserable about this. I just want you to know I don't blame you. It was an accident, and I forgive you." Whoa. This, it almost set off an explosion in my adult client. This just changed everything for her father in that picture, and that rippled all the way up the timeline. But there's one more tweak we threw in at that point with that forgiveness happening. I said, how about if we bring in the dog's spirit? And suddenly the hunting dog's spirit is there, snuffling around the grave, rubbing up against their legs, and then, frisking off into the woods. And that added a level of happiness to the picture that had been missing. It had still been very sad, but everyone saw, well, the dog isn't really dead. The spirit of the dog lives on, and we got a beautiful picture there. We re-imprinted it, which just means bringing it through the head, the body, and out from the heart. We re-imprinted that for Dad, and when we came back up the timeline to where my client was 8 years old, it was the homework grilling, everything had changed. It was like she had a completely different dad. His whole life had gone a different way. He was no longer obsessed with the competition, with proving himself. And it was no big deal. We ended up with a very nice picture and re-imprinted that too. Sometimes something that goes back a generation or two just has such a powerful impact on us today. And matrix reimprinting is a beautiful way of getting back in there. Even if we don't start off knowing what that is, we can find it, we can get back in there, and we can do the healing for our parents or our parents' parents. We can go way back and fix everything. So I just wanted to share this session with you. I thought it was beautiful, had a very profound, powerful effect on my client. And thank you very much for listening. Again, this is Rob Nelson with Tapping the Matrix. Take care.